You got your Mac guys here on Bird 365 Football Friday leading into an Eagles playoff game. Well, we'll be back Monday. Then we'll really be leading into the Eagles playoff game, but we're certainly prepping for it now. And we're lucky enough to get Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com to jump on with us for a couple of minutes. Andrew, I think I asked this someone maybe as early as Tuesday this week, one of our guests. We've had 17 games, 18 weeks to determine what the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles identity is. What would you say their identity is?
I have no idea what their identity is. Offensively, it's a clunky offense, and there hasn't been much consistency there. And then defense, I mean, where do we start? John and I have talked about this throughout the year. They don't have anything that they can hang their hat on. So last season, the pass rush was those are obvious hallmark to their defense, but that hasn't even been the case this year. So to answer your question, I don't know you can definitively say that they have an identity.
Yeah, it's not good to be looking for an identity in week one of the postseason, but that's where the Eagles are. Do you need an identity to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though, Andrew?
No, yeah, that's a team that you should be able to, given the talent that the Eagles have, you should be able to show up and beat them playing a game. If you're able to play like they did, I guess, like they did against the Giants on Christmas, you should be able to beat them, at least offensively. I don't know how they're going to be able to cover Mike Evans and those guys, but I don't know that you need an identity to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But further down the line is where that becomes
then it becomes then it becomes an issue. Yeah. But this week, I think they can get through it. You mentioned Mike Evans. I would say how excited Darius Slay going to be back. Torn meniscus, we know. That's a pretty serious injury. Obviously, it had to be a trim. It couldn't be the full repair. Are you expecting that to be a domino effect for that struggling Eagles defense? All of a sudden, Bradbury's back in a more familiar spot. You have the domino effect. You don't have Kelee Ringo and Eli Ricks on the field as much. Does that help this struggling defense?
It should. If you remember in that first matchup, I believe Josh Jobe was starting for maybe it was Bradbury. I think that was
Bradbury kicked inside. That was the Bradbury the plot game. Yeah.
Right. So, I think getting a healthy secondary with your veterans in there, Avonte Maddox included, should be able to help. Now, we've seen that that's not necessarily be the case throughout the season, John. We look at it against the Arizona Cardinals, against the Giants last week. There's just communication breakdowns all over the place. So against an offense more equipped to exploit that, I don't know how you can go into it confident, even with Darius Slay returning to the lineup.
Since we went to the cornerback position, I'll follow up there. When healthy, certainly the first however many games of the season, when Bradbury and Slay are both healthy, they play 100% of the snaps. They play every single snap on the outside. Slay's coming back from an injury. Bradbury's been he wasn't terrible last week. That's the best I can come up with for Bradbury at this stage. He's had a really bad year. Will Ricks and Ringo still play this week? They've been forced into action to play because of Slay's injury and trying them in the slot before Avonte Maddox came back. Are those two guys a factor at all this week?
That's a question that I've got for the past 3 weeks or so. Should Kelee Ringo hold on to that starting spot even when Darius Slay comes back? Should you put James Bradbury on the bench? And I maintain, Jody, no. I think you need to roll out your veteran secondary, the Avonte Maddox, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, and then maybe you rotate someone like a Kelee Ringo or an Eli Ricks into the game. More so Kelee. I just don't think that there's going to be a ton of snaps for Ricks, but I think that those guys, to throw them in there, forge them by fire, throw them in there in the postseason, that's a whole different level of competition. I don't know if that's fair to put either of those players in that situation.
All right, let's take it back to the offense because everybody wants to talk about the offense and what's wrong with the offense and why the offense can't do anything against the blitz, Andrew. This narrative I asked Nick Sirianni about Brian Johnson getting coaching interviews, and he finally said, he said this way too late about Gannon not being focused for the Super Bowl. He called it a silly narrative, which I agree with him wholeheartedly. Yeah. But the reason I bring that up is because I think it's a silly narrative that the Philadelphia Eagles coaching staff cannot insert a simple hot read or sight adjustment into the offense. It's a high school level concept. Every coaching staff in the NFL, from number one, the best one, down to the worst one, can insert that into their offense and has that into their offense. Sure. That's not the problem. What is the problem? What is going on with this team and its inability to handle the blitz?
Well, I know that's been something you've been driving home throughout the week, John. I've been keeping an eye on your Twitter.
Oh my God, I had to mute 6 million people.
Yeah,
I'm exaggerating.
When you look at the hot routes and things like that, you made a great point. Phillip Rivers, that was a staple in their offense. He was really good at identifying the blitz and being able to deliver the football on those hot routes. But for the Eagles,
that was all Frank Reich, Andrew, and Nick had nothing to do with that offense. That was all Frank Reich. Go ahead. Yes,
exactly. So, but I think when you look at it in the Eagles terms, you have an offense and a quarterback and a head coach in particular that seem hell bent on going after the explosive play, the big, the chunk play, versus taking what the defense is giving you. And you see a quarterback who doesn't really. He's sort of averse to checking the ball down. So I think when you're missing that element of your game, you're less inclined to look for those hot routes when they needed to be there. And you think that you need to put the offense on your shoulders and try and find a way to make a play, whether it be via the ground or trying to throw the ball down the field to AJ or things like that. I just think that Jalen wants to be Superman instead of taking what is presented in front of you.
All right, let's take it back to a happier time for Eagles fans. Last year's NFC Championship game. Brock Purdy almost has his elbow ripped off by Hassan Reddick, has to leave the game. Josh Johnson comes in, plays. They go, oh, my God, he can't play quarterback. They go to Wildcat with Christian McCaffrey for a couple of plays. That didn't work. They put Brock Purdy back into the game, knowing full well he can't throw. He cannot throw the football, but he went back in and played some quarterback for them. What do the Eagles do if Jalen Hurts can't throw?
Well, you hand the football off to DeAndre Swift, who had a tremendous game in the first matchup. There should be running lanes, but if it gets to the point where you're exploited and you're not able to pick up yards through the air, I think you have to consider putting Marcus Mariota out there. If it becomes such a detriment that it's impacting what you're able to do offensively and you completely have to scrap what you're doing, I think you need to reevaluate and maybe make a quarterback change. But I think that even if Jalen's limited in throwing, I think you have to lean on the running game this week and see what you're able to do there. Because like I said, they had some success doing that back in week 3.
If you can't throw at all, you got to play Mariota. Yeah. I mean,
I'll put it in a perspective. He's 4 of 10 for 30 some odd yards early second quarter. You've had 2 possession, 3 possession, whatever. You've gotten a couple first down. You got no points, but he's 4 for 10, and balls are just not going where they're supposed to. You can see that it's an accuracy thing, and you can probably tell that he just is. When I say he can't throw, this is not a compliment of Jalen Hurts' career. Where in this given game, because of the finger injury, he can't throw. Do you go running first or immediately to Mariota? That was the question I was trying to ask.
Yeah, if he literally can't throw the football, I think you have to – this is what you brought in a veteran like Marcus Mariota for. Obviously, it was sort of to help Jalen Hurts develop and things like that. But you plug him in and you don't hesitate, because you can't just scrap the whole game plan because your quarterback can't throw. I think you have to lean on your veteran and go that route, because especially if the game's winnable, if the game's within reach, you don't just continue to roll Jalen Hurts out there, hand the ball off, and eventually the Buccaneers are going to catch on to that. A guy can't throw. you got to go Marcus
Yeah.
Mariota.
Well, now you have the conspiracy theorists. They're always out there, Andrew. The Eagles are creating excuses in advance in case they lose the game, which is always astonishing. But these players are very competitive. Jalen's going to play. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to play. And we'll see where he is health-wise. Damo, we had Paul Domowitch on. He talked to Dr. Jessica Flynn. She seems to think he should be fine with a little splint. May affect his accuracy a little bit, and then you have to sort of judge where he is from that perspective. But I think you're right. This is a big DeAndre Swift game, and that should excite most of the Eagles fan base who love running the football. So we're going to see. They got to rely on DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell. You're not going to see Rashad Penny.
No, not after last week with that poor blitz pickup.
Yeah, blitz pickup is a thing. So this offensive line, which PFF has declared the best offensive line in football for the second consecutive season. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's not perfect. They have their own hand, and we were talking about the blitz pickup. They've struggled at times with blitz pickup. And I think they've struggled at times when it comes to I don't think they've been as dominant as they have been in the past. You think that's fair or unfair?
I do think that's fair. When you look at certain matchups this year that they should have dominated, I think that they were a culprit. Everyone said that the Eagles couldn't run the football. That's why they were struggling. Well, part of that was due to the offensive line not being able to generate the push that they should have. You can look at some of the running backs. You don't have that downhill power element to your running game. But I also think there were certain matchups this season, John, that you can go back and look at that the offensive line should have been able to dominate and clear running lanes for these guys, and they just simply weren't able to do it. You also look at the uncharacteristic penalties. Jason Kelsey's got a ton this year, and I think that it's fair to say that they have not lived up to expectations.
I ran this by Paul Domowitch earlier, and I kind of disagreed with his answer because I think he was misstating numbers. It seemed to me like the Eagles weren't using all that much 12 personnel. And there's 12 personnel, and then there's 12 personnel. There's 12 personnel to get an extra guy out into the pattern, and there's 12 personnel to keep an extra guy in the block.
Sure.
It didn't seem to me like that 12 personnel, which I thought Tomo kind of overstated. And it's tough to judge by snap counts last week because Goddard got pulled. So Stoll, and does that count as 12 personnel when you're putting Stoll and Calcaterra out there? Do we really even need to analyze that if that's your 12 personnel? Do you think they'll do more of that this week because we know Tampa's going to be blitzing like Wink Martindale blitzes?
Absolutely, especially when you look at it with the quarterback maybe not being able to throw the football. You're going to have to lean on a heavy run approach. I think you're going to see a lot of Jack Stoll. I think he's going to certainly see an uptick in snaps, and especially – you look at the blitz pickup as well. It just makes a lot of sense. That's what you really need against a defense like that they're going to throw all kinds of things at you. I think that's how you sort of alleviate that. I mean, I would be shocked if you didn't see that.
Defense. Andrew DiCecco. I want you to put on your Matt Patricia pencil and figure out what the hell you're going to do to stop this sieve. I mentioned Slay before. Maybe it's as simple as, well, Slay's back. Zach Cunningham maybe knocks some of the rust off where the poor performance against the Giants. Maybe Maddox knocks some of the rust off.
You would have thought that Zach Cunningham was the second coming of Ray Lewis, by the way. Folks were clamoring for him to return to the lineup.
It did not look good against the New York Football Giants, but overall, he's been better than the alternatives. Is it just about getting those guys back? And it's never going to be great, I said, but can it be serviceable on a particular game day to get you to let the offense go win the game?
I think so. I think getting Darius Slay back shouldn't be understated. I thought he's played very well this season given the circumstances, and I think it sort of alleviates James Bradbury being picked on, and it sort of masks him a little bit. Getting Maddox into the lineup now, Maddox I think he looked a little rusty in his first couple games back.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see if maybe now this will be his third game, I believe. We'll see if he's able to sort of settle in. But I think not having some stability there, John. You and I have talked about it all season long. You have guys shuffling in and out. There's no continuity. Guys don't have a clue of what they're doing. It impacts the communication. I think having your veterans back there and Bayard, we'll have to see what they do with safety, because if Blankenship can't go and they're overly reliant on the three safety looks,
yeah,
I mean that's going to be a problem.
That's because Sidney's out, obviously. I expect them to put him on injured reserve at some point, and they'll probably bring up Mekhi Gardner or Tristan McCullum. I don't think they're going outside the organization.
At this point, it wouldn't make any sense to get somebody up to speed with the playbook and expect them to be, an impact guy.
And they would have done it already if they were going outside the organization. But, I mean, they are so thin at safety. So thin at safety. Losing Sidney Brown, if Reed Blankenship can't go, it's Kevin Byard and, Mekhi Gardner or Tristan McCullum. You got to make a decision.
I would probably say Garner, because he was the one that they gave he ran out of elevations first. I think he was their first guy up. But Tristan McCullum, I thought, looked decent in that game on Sunday at MetLife. He looked like the only one that was interested in making tackles. And
how about this? I'm going to go Jim Schwartz on you. How about this? Move Avonte Maddox back to safety.
Oh,
and start manipulating the slot that's worked so well and have more communication issues.
We're not going back to moving Bradbury into the slot, are we, at this stage?
Well,
you talking about communication issues.
What would you rather have? Would you rather have Maddox out there with Bradbury and Ringo, or would you rather have Mekhi Gardner or Tristan McCullum out there? You got to start thinking outside the box a little bit. Jim would do that.
It's a fair question. Neither. I would say this: neither option is very. I wouldn't be optimistic with either option. But I think Mekhi Garner is interesting as a hybrid type player. He's really
I think he should have made the football team. You know me. I thought
I
make the football team.
Why'd they activate McCollum last week and not Gardner?
Well, he was out of elevation.
Out of and McCollum, McCollum was out. Yeah, he had one left, and
now they reboot for the playoffs, so you don't have to worry about that. But I mean, those elevations, there's a strategy to them, and once you're out, you either got to put them on the 53 or you can't elevate him.
And when Garner was elevated, did he actually play, or was he just?
He played against the Jets because he had to, because Reed, if you remember, got that nasty block. Was it Lazard? Alan Lazard, I think, hit him. But other than that, Jody, it was just special teams, really. And Tristan McCullum was pretty much special teams, predominantly special teams, until he was pressed into duty last Sunday.
And they might have overused their elevations at some point, but again, not going to blame that as the reason they've lost 5 of their last 6 games. Bigger fish to fry there.
You got to hope Reed is healthy. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And I think it's fair to have a discussion about Reed Blankenship and his health. He's left games.
Third injury.
He had multiple rib injuries. I think he had the forearm. He got stepped on against Washington early in the season.
He had a concussion at one point. Yeah.
And if you remember, he got hurt last year as well in a more limited sample size against the Giants.
Yeah.
At MetLife. So I don't know. It's fair to have that conversation.
All right. I want to have a conversation with you about a specific phrase, which you might have a definition for. I might have a definition for. John might have a different definition from us too. And different people use it and define it different ways. Lost the locker room. If the Eagles have lost the game on Monday, I guarantee you people will be saying on Tuesday that Nick Sirianni has lost the locker room. And it does all come down to defining it. There's an ambiguity there that you have to decide for yourself what that actually means. So in the lexicon that Andrew DiCecco uses, do you believe Nick Sirianni has lost the locker room?
I think lost the locker room is, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, but I think that when you make a switch to a defensive play caller from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia, the optics of that isn't great. And I'm sure that rubs some people the wrong way inside that building. And I think that's really where things started to go sideways here, Jody, to be honest with you. But I don't know that he's lost the locker room. I wouldn't go as far to say that. But I think that you can start having that conversation if you start to see things sputter and things leak out of there, like I guess there were certain instances against around the Seattle game where things were happening like that. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I don't think he's. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, so I'll go there. If people are talking about it, if the Eagles finish this thing up in the negative fashion and 5 of 6 turns into 6 of 7, and you lose to a team you should beat, and it turns into a Giants-like cluster, you know what? Nick Sirianni got to get fired.
Well,
I can't even believe we're talking about it. That's where I am. But
I can't believe about it. Yeah, I can't even believe we're having this discussion. But when you look at a coach like Mike Vrabel and things like that, no, it seems like no one is exempt. But on the other side of that coin, you have to say, what is the standard every year? Is the standard Super Bowl or bust? If you don't make it to the Super Bowl, or is your job in jeopardy? I mean, that's every coach's goal, but is it a realistic expectation every year? If you don't make it to the Super Bowl, your job's on the line.
And what's the alternative, by the way? Where are you going to go? Because this team isn't going to hire Bill Belichick. I don't care that Jeffrey Lurie was a Patriots fan and wanted to buy the Patriots. He wants to be involved. He doesn't want to hand his organization over to somebody and say, go. And that's what Bill has the cachet to do. He's not going to sit and say, oh, maybe you should do this. It's not Bill Belichick.
And who replaces Nick Sirianni, by the way, if you do get rid of him?
Everybody that's what I'm saying.
Everybody wants somebody gone, but they don't have a sound plan of attack to replace that person. So, I mean, Brian Johnson.
I'll tell you who I want.
I'll
tell you right now. You asked who to replace him. I'll give you the name. Nick Saban. I want Nick Saban.
Nick Saban.
At age 72. Friggin' everybody's salivating over Belichick at 71. I'll take Saban at 72.
Nick Saban. Now, why would you take Nick Saban at 72 over Bill Belichick at 71? Age has nothing to do with it. But why would you take, in the NFL, why would you take Nick Saban over Bill Belichick?
Energy. He's got more energy than
Bill. Then take Pete Carroll. He's got more energy than both of them combined.
I take Pete Carroll before I take Belichick, too.
He's got more energy.
The Nick Saban experiment in the NFL didn't work too well when he was with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
I remember he made one player cry. It was on SportsCenter. I remember it very vividly.
Well, he's a great coach, a great college coach. And I think if he would have stuck it out, eventually he would have become a very good NFL coach. But yeah, I mean, Bill's the greatest coach of all time. So I'm not gonna put anybody over Bill Belichick, but the Eagles are a different type of organization. They don't want that kind of powerful head coach. And you could debate that. That's fair. But I think if you look at Jeffrey Lurie's history, and really Chip Kelly broke him, you don't want to go through that again. And he wants control. And by the way, he has every right. It's his team. And if he wants to be involved, he should be involved. He just doesn't want that. So people can talk about it, but it's not. So you have to start recalibrating. If you really want to get rid of Nick Sirianni and you really want to be realistic about it, you have to start thinking about the other guys who are getting interviewed, the hot candidates, the Ben Johnsons of the world.
The Brian Johnsons of the world.
Yeah, well, not Brian, because obviously he's the worst coach in the history of mankind. But
obviously,
the hot and before, when you think about Nick Sirianni, they wanted to interview Arthur Smith. That's the guys you're talking about: Arthur Smith and Robert Saleh and Brandon Staley. Those were the hot candidates at the time. How'd that work out, by the way?
Well, remember Gerard Mayo was on the Eagles coaching.
Yeah, they interviewed him when they during the Sirianni interview process during that year. He was one of the earlier interviews.
Right.
And they liked him, but they felt he wasn't ready to take that step
So,
at that
John,
stage.
just a quick question for John, if you let me, Andrew. Thank you. Are the Jets doing right by going with continuity of Robert Saleh as compared to Arthur Smith? Or
that is what I would call a solid cross-examination, Jody, because while I express, and I'm a big fan of continuity, I read you the list. All the coaches that have had, chances are the best coaches in the NFL, basically, from Mike Tomlin, 17 years, 17 winning seasons, down to Zach Taylor, and who's turned into a pretty solid coach. I would fire Robert Saleh. It does. Brandon Staley as well, Arthur Smith as well. They did a bad job. It's not about, just keep going with the same guy doing a bad job, doing a bad job, doing a bad job. But the difference between them and Nick Sirianni is Nick Sirianni's got a 667 winning percentage,
right,
and has made the playoffs 3 consecutive times. So,
right,
to me, there's a large difference. Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't just want to make change for the sake of making change, or keep somebody in that role just for the sake of continuity. But I think that when you look at Nick Sirianni, you have to look at that 667 winning percentage and not have the recency bias when you're sort of assessing it. And like I said, a lot of folks want the head coach replaced, but there's not a sound replacement, a sound tactic to replace the coach. So I don't necessarily understand where they're coming from in that regard.
All right, Andrew, last one for me. And you see that I'm crossing my fingers here. Does Quez Watkins have another big game left in him? Because if AJ goes down, or if Devontae turns the ankle, shoot, Quez was wide receiver 1 last week, which is just mind-boggling to me. But he
John and I were thinking of you, by the way.
He got a touchdown.
20-point score on a bad NBA team. Somebody's got to score 20. When you don't have anybody else, somebody's got to score 20. He got
more catches and a touchdown than he did in the first 17 weeks of the season. Just unbelievable. But circumstances, stuff like that happens. Is Quez a factor again this week? Because we were talking about all 12 looks with 2 tight ends. That means no time for Quez. Is Nick Sirianni going to fall into the Quez trap of, see, I told you guys Quez could play. We finally gave him a chance. Will Quez be a factor in Monday night's game?
I don't think so. I think it dependent on AJ's situation. If he's limited at all, and they're trying to have, or maybe if they have him on a snap count, you might see Quez take on a larger role, Jody. But they're gonna intermix guys like Julio and Zacchaeus and Quez. You're gonna see more of the same, I would think, of throughout the season. Quez's outbreak or his breakout was more circumstantial than anything else. Yes. So I wouldn't expect a repeat performance or anything like that.
At Andrew DiCecco, make sure you follow Andrew on X, Twitter, whatever you like to call it. Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com does a tremendous job covering this team with our buddies Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. Check out everything over at Inside the Birds. I'll end it there. We're not going to have you on before the game, so got to lock you down. Who's going to win? Philadelphia Eagles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
It's easy to say the Eagles are going to drop this one and continue their free fall, but I just don't see it. I think the Eagles win this game, say 24-20.
Ooh, close.
I like
close,
the Eagles,
but an Eagle victory. Andrew, we appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much. Enjoy the game on Monday. We're going to tap into all continued playoff run or off season. We got to figure out which one it is. We will
NFL draft.
Yeah,
we will know by Monday
your
night.
Ballywick. We got to get you on draft prep. Hopefully, we're not talking about the draft.
Draft evaluation could start Tuesday. Exactly.
It could.
Andrew, good stuff. Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Andrew
Thanks, man.
DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back. You know what we got to do. Put a bow on the show.